Her true story from New York. I gave my son a villa, but his wife's family moved in. One line made them pack and leave. This isn't your inheritance. It's my warning. That evening, the garden glowed under strings of fairy lights as the cicadas chirped in the warm summer air. The villa's stone patio was set with long tables and white linens, polished wine glasses, and flower arrangements that bloomed under the soft glow of lanterns. I sat at the edge of the gathering, poised in my wheelchair next to the hedge, the hum of laughter buzzing around me. I wore a light summer dress, pale blue, the color my late husband always said brought out my eyes. My hands rested in my lap, fingertips clasped together, as I observed the crowd that had filled my home. My son, surrounded by his wife's family, all talking and laughing, oblivious to the presence of the woman who had given them this very villa. A cousin of my daughter-in-law leaned forward in his chair, loud enough for me to hear over the babble of voices. He said, "Look at her. I swear she is like a ghost clinging to this place, as if people still thought she belonged." His words were coated in amusement and disdain. They cut through me like a blade, sharper than any silence had the right to be. I kept my expression blank, though my heart surged with icy fire. Before I could exhale, my daughter-in-law tossed her hair and laughed, stepping forward so that her voice reached the entire table. She looked me in the eye and said, "Mother, this house is now our foundation. It is for our future. If you know what's good for you, step aside and don't block what we are trying to build. We are the future. You are nothing but a drifting remnant of the past." Her words suffocated me. The laughter around the table bulged outward in waves, rocking the atmosphere, cementing my isolation. My son gave me a sharp glance, conflicted, yet unmoving. The glare in his eyes told me he was ashamed of me, or afraid, or both. I felt the world that I had so carefully constructed, brick by brick, memory by memory, fracture under the weight of a sentence. I blinked, refusing to cry, refusing to show them that they had wounded me. My granddaughter stood nearby, dressed in a frilly dress, oblivious to the cruelty unfolding in her name. I forced a small, polite smile at her, and then willed myself to remain silent. Around me the band began playing, guests toasted, conversations shifted. It was as though they had swept me out of the narrative without even pausing. My chest heaved. I took a breath and straightened. They wanted me gone. They had already pulled me out of the inheritance, in word and in deed. I would not fight them here, not now. My presence here was no longer safe. But that quiet desperation in me kindled something resolute. They expect me to fade. They expect me to vanish like an old photograph. They misjudged me. I watched them parade through the villa, chatting about Instagram posts they would film outside, discussing renovations they would make once signed contracts were done. This place, this home, was still mine. Still mine. For now. But I would show them, one way or another, that I was not powerless, that love has limits, and that kindness given can be reclaimed. I tuned into their laughter and shelved a decision. I would not confront them tonight. I would not cry for them. I would stay strong for myself. I would plan. I would move in shadows. As the candles flickered and the band played a slow melody, I leaned back, folding my hands, eyes fixed on the twinkling lights above. Tonight I would not sleep. Tonight I would gather evidence, collect memories, and prepare the first stone of my warning. They may call me a relic, a shadow, a drifting ghost. They may already see me as the past. But tonight, in the quiet under the lanterns, I vowed that tomorrow would be different. Tonight I stay awake. When I close my eyes, I can still sense the sweat and hope that shaped this villa in the first place. It started by cutting short lunches and heading home early from my managerial job in the city. I kept a ledger tucked in my desk drawer, every dollar saved, every bonus allocated to that dream. I found weekend cleaning gigs, babysat for neighbors, and always folded the extra cash into my account marked Villa Fund. Thrift store curtains, do-it-myself paint jobs, bargain fixtures. None of it felt like sacrifice. It felt like purpose. Every piece of that house carries a memory of diligence, of quiet years spent building something lasting. The day I walked onto those empty hills and saw the blank canvas of a future, I felt the weight of history settle onto my shoulders. I called my son later that night and said, "This will be ours, our family." His excited "yes" echoed in my heart, as though we were both building a legacy together. When his wedding came, that beautiful day when he promised his life to a woman I once welcomed, I told him, "This villa is now yours. Make it a home." I handed them the keys with a smile, handed them the home I had built from the ground up, with land and the first mortgage paid. I meant every word. I trusted them to carry it forward. Those early days were luminous. Christmas tinsel and grandchildren's laughter echoing down the halls. Summer breezes carrying laughter onto the terrace as we sipped iced tea. Thanksgiving dinners under the skylight. Junior golfers on the lawn. Birthday candles stacked on pink cakes. I brought over casseroles and lasagnas. We sat together at the long dining table on Sunday evenings, talking, laughing, sharing. I'd wake early for our morning coffees, sit on the patio, watch them wake, my son with sleepy mustache, his wife brushing back hair, and feel a swell of pride. They had made something genuine of my dream. I treasured that time, evenings when my granddaughter sat on my lap, reading me books she had learned just for me. We planted daisies together in pots out back, naming each Hope. I was their anchor, and they held me like a blessing. I walked the hallways, polished with familiarity, the bedroom where my son's first steps were tucked into old photos, the kitchen, oh the kitchen, where I had shown them how to make chicken stew and fresh biscuits. We carried those flavors together. I taught them how to bake, how to budget, how to care. It was more than a home, it was a classroom, a cocoon. When they first moved in, I taped their pictures to the fridge, wedding snapshots, ultrasound scans. As the months went by, I saw them flourish. Their careers, the dinners they hosted, the newborn blessing their home. And I thought, this is enough. This is why I saved. This is why I poured every ounce of sweat, every early morning, every holiday paycheck into those walls and floors. They called me Mom or Mama or the occasional Super Nana. I was the one who stood with my right hand wrapped in their boy's first button-down shirt, smoothing back his hair. I clapped the loudest at the recital. I drove from the city on holidays without complaint. I taught my granddaughter to ride a bike on the gravel driveway. I thought they cared. The villa became their gathering place midweek and weekends. Friends from college, work colleagues, neighbors, they all came to our door. I had grown up in less than tenement rooms, but never so poor that we had no home. My achievement had culminated in this place, and now I was giving it. No strings, no evenings locked with legal stamps. I gave it freely, trusting that love and respect would follow. It was intoxicating to see them settle in. I still had my apartment in the city, but every Thursday I packed my bags and headed out early, anticipating their voices in the hallway, the smell of dinner simmering. I would hang my coat, check the mail, make the split pot of coffee they preferred, and feel in me that familiar sense of completion, my family under one roof. But then I began to notice little things. A framed photo of me, tacked in the mudroom one day, it was gone the next. My favorite cushion on the porch, replaced with a sleek, modern chair. My name said quietly in their household conversation grew quieter until it was no longer. I chalked it up to change, to evolution, to the natural drift of generations. I hoped it was normal. Then came the first family gathering, scaled up, bigger, slicker. A table of champagne and event planners who didn't know me, flowers I didn't recognize. They started talking about the villa vision and branding, not home. They shot TikTok videos in the entryway, plastering glitzy signs, the Smith Villa takeover. I realized then that I had handed them more than a house. I had handed them a commodity. That hurt. Not the slipping respect. That hurt, because the vision I offered, the lifeblood of the house, was being sold to strangers, and I was fading at the edge of my own creation. Yet still I visited. I still brought cantaloupes from the market, flowers from the city, trays of pierogi and molasses cakes. I still taught my granddaughter to sew hems, to write thank you notes. But I sensed how I was slipping into memories they no longer lived in. I would remind myself that every brick belonged to me. Every room, every window. I closed my eyes and remembered how my hands carried bags of stucco and nails, how I signed the final mortgage papers, how I walked those empty halls at dusk, imagining laughter there. They had dotted those dreams with their own sugar now. I thought, isn't that what family does? You craft a home, Hand it to them, and they make it sing with warmth and familiarity. But this warmth, this welcome was different. It was staged, for followers, for image. The house had become a set. It's not just the house, it's the betrayal. Emotional, cultural, generational. I caught glimpses when I visited, my name missing on the guest list, the terrace towels folded without thought, my affection treated like free entertainment. My son's eyes would avoid mine across the table. He'd clear his throat, shift topics. I felt the shrinking of my place in the world I'd built, but still I did not confront, not yet. I watched, and I remembered why I gave them so much. I reflected on every brick and every broken hope. I held my silence like a shield against shame, and here, in the quiet core of the house that once healed all fear, I thought, I will fight this, not with anger, not with noise, but with truth. And if kindness is a gift, then sternness is the path to reclaim. Because if a house holds the past, then we hold the future, and one day their vision will collide with what the villa really stands for, and I will be here, ready. The signs began subtly, and swiftly crescendoed into betrayal. It started with a buzz of excitement every Saturday morning. Camera crews, bright lights, and social media planners rolling up to the driveway. My husband's old Corvette was replaced by a brand new setup labeled the Smith Villa HQ. My villa, once an intimate family retreat, became their promotional backdrop, and I became an afterthought. The first TikTok shoot happened on a crisp spring day. I arrived bearing lemon bars and peach cobbler as usual, only to find the driveway filled with half a dozen young people, tripods, microphones, and boom arms. My granddaughter greeted me with shy enthusiasm. Her mother gave me an apologetic smile, as though I had suddenly become someone to manage with care. "Grandma, come smile at the camera," she whispered. So I walked forward, expecting to be greeted. Instead, the director said, "Not yet," and turned away mid-laugh. "We want natural moments," he explained, "not staged interferences." I froze. The young woman with the ring light looked over her shoulder at me and said, "You could, just watch from the side." I did. My presence hovered at the edge of every frame, like a shadow that needed to be masked. I stood at the perimeter, carrying my lemon bars, growing smaller in their lens but not in my memory of those same hallways. Every corner I entered, I sensed a silent agreement. That shot needs a clean tableau. They erased any trace of me with their procedures. A curtain pulled, a camera angled out, a door closed. In subsequent weeks I realized the villa had become their backstage stage. Their rooftop brunches live-streamed with hashtags. Villa views, Smith family moments. Photos of us together were scrapped, replaced by slow zooms of manicured lawns or trendy mid-century furniture they'd brought in. My personal chair, oak, custom-made with my name carved on the back, was moved to the attic. My sewing basket was banished to a dusty closet beneath the stairs. My grandmother clock was taken off the mantel, replaced by a glossy mirror. My presence was not unwanted, it was inconvenient. It hurt more when they evangelized about the villa as if it were entirely theirs. On Instagram, my daughter-in-law wrote, "Creating our legacy, this is our home." In response, the villa's photo comments filled with hearts and applause, none recognizing the hands that built the walls. The removal of my furniture hit hardest. I found, one afternoon, that my favorite rocking chair, the one I'd sat in while singing to my granddaughter, was gone, missing, without word. When I asked, they said, "Oh, we just moved it upstairs so the floors don't scratch." A face-saving explanation, but an erasure of my long-nourished ritual of mornings I'd wake and rock while sipping coffee. That chair had been my anchor. Then came the day when my granddaughter screamed from the attic, "Grandma, someone took my storybook." I climbed the narrow stairs to find the room empty, her book gone. The space had become their storage closet for lights, camera gear, and plastic furniture labeled scene props. My granddaughter's tears echoed what I felt. We were disappearing, yet I persisted in being helpful. I continued to bring food, to bake, to offer advice. The first time I suggested a simple book exchange for their followers, just a table of family favorites. They shot me a look and said, "Let's keep it hyper-curated, minimalistic." They didn't want a grandmother, they wanted a brand. The villa, once full of personal laughter and memories, transformed into a sleek showroom. The scent of pastry was replaced by expensive diffuser oils. I remember walking past the living room arch, where the piano used to be, arranged for photo shoots. My son played there once. Now the space looked empty, too perfect. I realized what was happening. I had gifted them a vessel of life. They were using it as bait for likes. They were hunting for followers, not memories. It did not hurt to be forgotten. It hurt to be deliberately omitted. One afternoon, I stood in the hallway, watching them rehearse a scene. "Mom, bring out the sunlight into the drone shot, sweetie," they squealed. I turned and found myself in a silent part of the hall, imagining that if I were a guest who had just arrived, I would be too embarrassed to sit or laugh or speak. The scene would keep rolling, even if it meant bypassing me entirely, but I still believed in the people I built that house for. So I watched, waiting. Every removal of my things, every editing of me out of memory, I logged it, pattern by pattern, detail by detail. Because while kindness deserves grace, trust must not be exploited. The villa became a symbol of exploitation, a modern designer's backdrop without soul. And I, the woman who planted that soul, was treated like an intruder. That contrast fueled the resolve settling in my chest. I would not be a ghost in my own home. I would be its warning. That warning needed more than sound, it needed weight. I was laid bare. Something had to be done. Because a home is more than a digital set. It is sanctuary, history, inheritance, and it is mine, even when they treat it as merchandise. I stayed quiet, but I listened. I catalogued. It will come. They will understand. And with each edited frame, each removed cushion, each rearranged scene, they were digging their undoing. That weekend, I arrived at the villa late afternoon, ready to bake my grandson's favorite chocolate sponge cake. The kitchen door stood ajar and I slid in, only to find my daughter-in-law hovering over a contract spread on the countertop, a tablet in hand. "Mother," she began with a cool tone I had never heard before, "we really need you to sign this." I paused, spoon halfway to bowl. The document was titled Media Release and Waiver of Liability. I froze on the spot when I scrolled through to the clauses. I, the property owner's Italian linen washer, GRANDMOTHER, waive all rights to control the commercial use of the property. I waive liability. I waive image rights. I waive copyright on any video or photo content shot here. I waived, even, access to the premises during any recording events. I closed the cover silently, and in my mind the walls collapsed. I had come here to feed them, to love them, to anchor them, but they were now requiring me to legally erase my own presence. "You're chasing views, not memories," I said, voice dangerously soft. She shrank back. I knew my presence and my words frightened the producer more than any cameras. But I feel ashamed. I hesitate, tracing each clause with my fingertip as though I could erase it by touch. "They need me to sign this so you cannot object to using my image at all," she said, stepping forward. "We just need to keep consistency in messaging." Her words dripped with corporate dryness. "Must be completed before the next shoot." I thought of the nights I lay awake folding laundry and wiping tables. I remember breakfast with pancakes for my granddaughter and whispered stories about her mother's childhood. I remember how I once stood here singing carols and counting every ornament hung in memory of wisdom and laughter. Those walls held everything I had given, everything I had lived if they wanted to remake it into a revenue stream, a viral brand that was a frontier. I folded the waiver, slid it into place without a signature, tapped sharply with the bowl on the counter, my first scream by proxy. "I thought this was a family home," I said, letting the words echo. "I thought this was for years of birthdays and baptisms." She turned her wedding ring under the light, I continued. "But this here? This is a contract that says you can use me, break me, erase me. You can filter my smile, script my voice, film my grief, and you can do it without ever inviting me back." She was quiet. She stared at me, then looked down at the paper. "I cannot believe you prepared this," I whispered, exhausted. I could feel the end of her. Pause. "That's enough," I said, and I left the kitchen. I went into the corridor, down the hall that once smelled of fresh paint and possibility. Photos of my son's childhood, my family's gatherings, lined the walls, but I followed their fade until I reached the gate to the room at the end. It was supposed to be mine, the caretaker's paradise, but now it was locked, off limits. I knocked once. My hand trembled. Inside were lights and cables, placeholder furniture. A plaque, stuck to the door, read, "Talent Green Room, no entry." I touched it, and it felt heavier than any Golden Gate. The air of filmed nostalgia, polished and edited, carried into my bones, and I realized I was being priced out of the home I'd built. I slipped back to the living room, where a contractor was sketching new set pieces. The designer looked up and said, "Oh, you must be the grandma we don't use. We got the waiver today, so we have legal clearance." The words hit me like a bus. Clearance to ignore me, clearance to remove me, clearance to paint me out of life. I slumped into the nearest chair, my heart pounding. The villa had become their studio, staged, curated, monetized. My home had become their office, and I was the collectible that needed to be photographed once, then tucked away. I closed my eyes, tears pressing against my lids. I thought of what it had meant to bake cakes in this oven. Now they wanted my labor, my presence, my heart, and every bit of that they would use and then disclaim. I clenched my hands and inhaled through my nose. Remembrances, memories. I thought of folding sheets on my little bed across town and walking miles in winter to bring soup. I held steady. Enough. This was not my home if it didn't include me. They could repackage rooms, disguise their past, but they couldn't hide their disrespect. I understood then why we live in moments, not museums, because spaces without souls are silent. And I decided this would not stand. I would not sign, I would not submit, and I would not stay in this unspoken moment. I stood slowly, pressing my palms to the wood grain of their table, somewhere warm where laughter lingered a year ago, before strings and protests and hashtags. "Thank you for your consideration," I said quietly, choosing to choke down the bitter ounce of sarcasm. But inside, flames were fanned. They thought they were building a brand. I knew I was building a case. I walked out into the terrace as warm wind swept over my shoulders. Midsummer lights flickered overhead, mocking in their brightness. The villa felt hushed, soon to follow me. I pulled into my chest and whispered, "They cannot erase where I started. It is not a commodity. It is my legacy." My head dropped, and I murmured gently, "Tomorrow I begin to take back. This house that calls them future once belonged to my dreams, and I will claim the truth, even, especially, when I am knocked down." That night I lay awake in the guest room, gradually transformed into the producer's office, staring at the ceiling. The guilt in my chest was hot enough to scorch, yet the anger below was colder still. I flipped on my phone and sent a message to an old friend, a local investigative reporter I trusted. I wrote, "I need your help. Their version of family has turned my home into a product. I want the truth to come out." The next day, she showed up at the villa with discreet recording equipment, tiny cameras nestled in flower pots, lapel microphones hidden in throw pillows, and a charging pack tucked inside a book on the shelf. I watched as she set them around the living room and terrace, nodding ever so slightly to me. "We'll gather what we need, quietly." For the following week, I kept my distance, stroking the pots, adjusting the pillows. Meanwhile, they filmed. I overheard them during a TikTok shoot, backlit on the terrace, talking about their next shoot without me. Heck, she's not even in the contract. Let's not risk her image in the feed. And the villa is rolling in profit, yet somehow she's nowhere on the books. Their voices were light, businesslike, yet every syllable burned me. One evening, after dinner, I heard, "She hasn't signed the release. Doesn't matter, let's build the studio wings anyway. She won't say a word. She's sentimental, not litigious." That last phrase shook me. My palms were sweating inside my gloves, but I kept quiet. On another afternoon, I captured a clip. The director instructing the crew, "Make sure no baby pictures, nothing old, no legacy wall. This reel is about our life, not hers." He laughed. "Ghosts don't sell ads." I watched as the footage captured my erasure. Each whisper, each plan. They never realized the cameras were tracking them. A flash of disgust flared when I heard a family discussion behind a closed door. "We could call it a villa retreat, charge them camper prices," my daughter-in-law said, casually dumping business talk over the family retreat they once celebrated. "That's fine, just don't pay income tax, profits under the table," murmured her brother over the door. My reporter friend and I stashed the SD cards and left by midnight, hearts pounding and heads full. That footage changed everything. In their laughter echoed betrayal. In their plans, greed. In their voices, dismissal. Yet I did not confront them then. This wasn't my moment. It was theirs. I would let them speak first. It wasn't enough to bet on memory. I needed their words in legal form, captured without rehearsal. Their own scripts would become evidence. I realized this. I had given them a home. They were using my dignity for views and profit. They forgot. They did. Their future was flexible, until it cost me my past. And now, with cameras in place and their own voices caught, I had the beginning of the truth. Tomorrow, I would prepare the next step. That morning, I opened my email to find a headline that stopped my heart. Villa Scandal. Family accused of illegal profits, tax fraud, published by the New York Post. I read the piece with trembling fingers. There, beneath the gleaming images of sunlit rooms and glamour shots, was the story unraveling the toxic thread. A family once welcomed into my home had transformed it into a cash stream and live stream, while wiping me out of both image and worth. The article detailed how confidential recordings, review of undisclosed income and tax irregularities had procured the privilege to film commercials in my villa without paying proper income tax or declaring profits. I pressed my forehead against the cold screen. It was both vindication and heartbreak. My private moment shared publicly, without my face, but with all their voices. The accusations were spelled out. Illegal tax evasion, commercial filming without permits, even exploitative use of family property. The names were theirs. It felt surreal. It felt like the end of the world I had built. The phone rang almost immediately. The voice on the line was professional, a little distant, yet curious. Me, Levin, the IRS agent said in clipped tones. We're opening an inquiry based on reported commercial activity. We need to speak with you as property owner, or at least the person who granted permission. I swallowed. Within an hour, a smaller news outlet followed with an explainer piece, reprinting evidence, audio tapes of them joking about profits, about ducking taxes, about the convenience of doing it under a non-recognition deal. My daughter-in-law was quoted. Mom won't object. She's sentimental. We can just deduct expenses as home use. That quote stung deeper than physical pain. I realized how they had relied on me, my trust, my silence, to build their brand, and when I didn't sign, they shrugged it off as irrelevant. But with those recordings, they owed me. Not just apologies, but clarity. They woke up, I heard shouting. By afternoon, my phone rang again. This time it was my son's voice, raw and uncertain. Mom, are you okay? I know what's happened. I'm so sorry. I didn't know it was that bad. I answered calmly, forgivingly. It's all right, Darl. You gather your information. I'm speaking with the investigators. You should do the same. There was silence. Then, they're panicked. But he didn't say who they were. By supper time, they showed up at the villa, unannounced. The whole group, daughter-in-law, in-laws, brother-in-law, standing awkwardly at the door, papers clutched loosely in hands, expressions taut. My son stepped forward. Mom, we want to cooperate, he said, voice shaking. Behind him, his wife looked away. I escorted them into the living room, the space now brittle with emotion. They began to speak. Daughter-in-law said, We didn't mean for any of this to happen. We thought it was just small. We didn't imagine filings. Her voice quivered so much, I recognized the tone of fear. Her mother stared at the rug as though it had personal guilt. Brother looked ashamed. Their entire persona, curated for cameras, collapsed in that room. I held tight to my notebook. I said, I have evidence. I offered a home. I offered trust. You turned that into property and profit. Now you need to answer to more than me. They stuttered. They tried apologies. My son turned to me, tears in his eyes. Mother, please, we can fix this. We will fix this. Just tell me, what should I do? I looked at my son, at his fractured family. Then I stood. I walked past them toward the front hall. I opened the front door and paused. You need to return to your lawyer, I called over my shoulder, voice steady. I'm going to let the investigators work. I'm going to talk to them, truthfully. Good luck. I closed the door. Their backs sagged. I heard the deep intake of air. They stayed on the porch for a few moments, then retreated. Without a word, without a glance back, I found myself holding my breath until the night came. I did not follow. I did not call, because now there was more than grace in my silence. there was consequence. That week, IRS notices came. The villa's utility records, their rental applications, commerce logs, it was a bonfire of truth. The IRS was demanding corrected returns and back taxes. They were embarrassed, affronted, scared. The apartments with cameras were shut down, the villas not. Those images, my villa, would not become a stage again, not under their command. When the dust settled, my son called. He was shaken, so was I. Mom, thank you for everything. I didn't know. I nodded at the phone. It's not about knowing or not knowing. It's about justice. He sighed. I understand. I'll cooperate fully. We ended the call. In the quiet that followed, I realized this was not retaliation, it was reclamation. You build a home with heart, not hashtags. I may have loved them, but I love truth more. And tonight, I slept, not because peace is restored, but because silence in justice is true comfort. That evening, I heard a soft knock at my door. When I opened it, I found my son standing there, his face pale, eyes red-rimmed, trembling, with a cocktail of grief, guilt, and desperation. Behind him, no one followed. His wife had already moved out. He stepped inside quietly. His glance swept over the living room, photos I had placed back on the shelves, a blanket folded neatly on the armchair, an untouched cup of tea cooling on the coffee table. He exhaled, the tension unraveling. "Mom, I need your help," he began, voice breaking. "They're asking for the villa papers. We need you to transfer ownership retroactively." He swallowed hard. "Sarah, she messaged me. She says she didn't realize and she's sorry. She wants to fix this." I leaned back into the armchair. My heart tightened. I had built something that had been torn apart under their watch, and now they wanted a legal redo when the storm had already hit. "She wants to fix it?" I echoed gently. My voice was steadier than I felt. "That's good. But that's hers to manage with her lawyer." He winced, sinking to the sofa. "Mom, please. I need this to go through. We can rewrite the names on the deed, make it official, your gift." I closed my eyes. Soft memories washed over me. Seeing him as a boy gripping my hand in this very room. Hearing his laugh echoing off the ceiling as he opened presents under this roof. I thought of the time I handed him the villa keys, eyes shining with hope and pride. "Yes, I gave it to you both. I trusted you," I said finally. "But trust is more than paper. It's respect." He looked up, hurt. "Mom, there's still a future here." I shook my head. I stood and walked to the window, where streetlights cast gentle shadows. That future was built on performance, not love. He rose, pacing the short length of the room. "Sarah is scared. She called to say she'll do anything. Pay back taxes, repurpose the recordings." I pressed my hand to the glass. "Honey, what she really wants is to erase this moment, to pretend it never happened." He stopped, eyes glimmering with sorrow. "You never told me it was yours, truly yours." "It was. It always will be." Silence fell heavy. Finally, he asked, "Will you grant the transfer?" I turned to face him. "No." He crumpled, sliding onto the couch. "Mom, please. This could fix everything, for us." I folded my arms, voice soft but resolute. "I gave it away once, with hope. I will not give it again." Tears welled, but I remained still, like the oak floorboards beneath us. He covered his face. "I have to leave," he whispered. "Sarah's not coming back. We can't live here without you." I approached and gently touched his shoulder. "Go where you must, son. You still have a mother here." He stood, walked to me, and for a moment held me. His tears fell onto my lap, soaking through my skirt. "I'm sorry," he choked. "I should have told you. I should have protected you." I patted his hand. "No more shoulda, darlin'. We see things only when we're faced with what they cost." He stepped back, suitcase in hand. "I'm filing for divorce. I can't reconcile myself to what's happened." I nodded. "I understand." He paused as though to ask if I would stop him. I met his gaze and smiled. No shame, no regret. "You owe me nothing more." He squeezed my hand, then left. I heard the front door click. I didn't move. I didn't cry, because when life breaks, you don't always chase the pieces. Sometimes you build something new. Days passed. I heard that they had packed their things, driven across state lines, headed for another city where his job had offered them a fresh start. Someone told me they sold the SUV and left nearly everything behind, even the studio gear. But the villa remained. It bore my name and my memories, untouched, intact. I chose to leave it that way. I visited once that week. I ate dinner in the vast kitchen, the way I used to, and turned the lights on one by one until the house glowed with stories. I placed a vase of lilies on the mantel and whispered, "Your home is safe." I didn't file new paperwork. I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't change a thing, because this was my stand. My gift had boundaries. My love had terms. I was not turning the page. They were erasing chapters. And I let them go. The last text I received from my son thanked me for standing tall. He said he hoped one day I'd forgive him, and that I'd find someone to share the villa with, and build new memories beside my heart. I did not reply, not yet. Instead, I steeped my tea, folded that letter into a drawer, and settled before the fire. It crackled with warmth. I remembered every weekend spent hosting him, teaching him, loving him. Now, I would tend to the villa in a different way. I would become its keeper, not its heir. Because sometimes, the greatest act of love is refusing to rewrite history. The morning sunlight poured through the arched windows of the villa, illuminating a scene I had only dreamed of. Rows of bookshelves filled with stories waiting to be read, tables scattered with knitting baskets and journals, and a small reading nook tucked into the corner. I stood at the entrance, heart pounding with pride and a sense of profound peace. This was not just a building, it was a sanctuary, my testament. I had reopened the villa as a community library for older women, those who had stories to share, wisdom to impart, and a quiet world to rediscover. I chose to name it The Rose, Margaret Library, after my own mother, a woman who had slept under a leaking roof and still found the strength to teach children to read by candlelight. She never owned a home, but she left behind a legacy of courage and knowledge. Today was the grand opening. I wore a simple dress in soft lavender, my mother's favorite color, and pinned a magnolia brooch to my lapel. As I stepped forward, a small group of neighborhood volunteers helped me cut the ribbon. The doors swung open to cheers, local women held bouquets, granddaughters skipped along the aisles, and even a few of the same reporters photographed the scene, not for scandal, but for celebration. No cameras, no slogans, just applause and laughter that filled the villa's halls again. I settled into the librarian's desk by the reading nook, scanning the room. A grandmother wove a blanket by hand. Two sisters browsed old novels. A woman who looked almost exactly like my mother at that age asked for help finding a biography of Eleanor Roosevelt. That book now sat in her hands. I guided her gently to a lighted seat, and she smiled, her eyes bright. Behind me, the main living room had been cleared to make space for a monthly storytelling circle. Across the mantel, a framed banner hung in gold script on parchment. "This isn't your inheritance, it's my redemption." I could feel the weight of those words. They were not meant to wound, but to heal and to warn. A reminder that legacy isn't simply handed down, it's reclaimed and transformed. I held a small stack of index cards, each with a name. Women I'd met in shelters, former teachers who lost their pensions, retirees without communities. I was proud to have personally invited them here, invited them home. This villa, once a source of hurt, now stood as a beacon of inclusion and respect. Late afternoon, people gathered on the terrace with cups of lemonade and shortbread cookies. I watched as laughter and conversation floated across the lawn, reaching into corners of the garden that once only echoed with silence. This was real. This was healing. After speeches, I walked through each corridor and room, remembering how music once echoed here, how shadows once lingered. I touched the spines of books and felt the hum of life returning. Moments later, I stepped away to slip into the old study by the front window, my favorite spot. I turned the doorknob quietly, closing the door behind me. Standing in front of the antique mirror, I gazed at my reflection. Silver hair, gentle lines, eyes bright with purpose. I smiled. I whispered to the woman looking back, "This is no longer their stage. I have become the librarian of my own story. In the home I built." I paused, running my fingertips over the magnolia brooch. The library was a bridge between past and future, between memory and hope. I whispered one final truth. "You wanted that space. I gave it back. Now this space belongs to me. I opened the drawer of the desk and placed the key inside, vaulted forever from those who never earned it. As I stepped back into the library, I carried no bitterness. I carried peace. In that moment, I understood something essential. Kindness has boundaries. Women, especially those who've nurtured others, deserve legacy, not exploitation. And when your kindness is taken, it is not weakness to reclaim it. It is strength. I crossed the carpet and joined the readers, grandmothers, sisters, and guardians of knowledge. A young woman looked up at me and said, "Thank you for bringing this place back to life." I nodded, eyes misting. "It's not just a building," I answered. "It's our home." And with that, I realized who truly inherited the villa, not the ones who tried to claim it, but the ones who deserved to belong. I closed my eyes, breathing in the soft hush of pages turning. I was home, at last. If you felt your kindness taken for granted or watched your legacy fade, know you're not alone. Sometimes the bravest act of love is reclaiming yourself. Join us on Grandma, True Stories. Together we celebrate the women who finally choose themselves.